I'm seeing some voltage irregularities in the instruments, so keep an eye out for sparks or flames or anything like that. Approaching maximum depth. The hole's feeling it, but it's still holding strong. Closing porthole shielding.
On March 22nd, 2022, Iron Lung was released on Steam. Created by developer David Szymanski, best known for his work on the New Blood title Dusk, Iron Lung could not have been a more different experience. While more recent fans of Szymanski's work may look at Iron Lung as a stark departure from the movement shooter genre he's known for, atmospheric psychological horror is more of a return to form for the American developer, who started his career with similar atmospheric titles such as The Sliver and The Music Machine. In the last year, Iron Lung has achieved enormous success in the indie horror community, but when releasing the game, David didn't think it was that great.
So Iron Lung was a game I did because I wanted to finish something. I'd started all of these prototypes and none of them, they all just weren't working for whatever reason, and I was getting really frustrated, and I wanted to have something I could release myself. I developed it over the course of a few months, kind of part-time, while I was working on Gloomwood and other stuff, and figured I would just put it out and it would sell, I don't know, a few thousand copies, and it would just be some, nice little side hustle in a way, and then it just exploded. I think releasing Iron Lung was very affirming, not just in the sense where it's like, oh cool, now there's another game that I'm known for, but also that people still liked smaller, weirder stuff that I could make. When I put it all together so that you could play it from beginning to end, I did my own first playthrough from beginning to end, and this was like a month or two before release. Pretty. It was a game that didn't take that long to put together. So I played it from beginning to end, and I was just like, this is a piece of garbage. I'm not even sure this is releasable. Because the problem is that it's Iron Lung, unlike something like Dusk or Chop Goblins or any of these other things, it's really just a one-time through game, and if you know all the beats that are going to happen and you know everything that's going to happen, it's really hard to figure out whether it's working or not. And I played through it and I'm like, this is boring. Like, people are going to be bored by this, but because I'm like, well, I'm going to release it anyway because I made it. Like, the thing that bothers me the most is work going to waste. Like, I really hate if I do something and then that work is like, it doesn't get released or it doesn't get used or things like that. So I'm like, well, I'm going to release it anyway, and then it turns out people love it.
Starting up Iron Lung, I was immediately met with the iconic ocean of blood the game advertises. It's vast and unsettling, and combined with the low-poly aesthetic of the early PlayStation 1, creates the perfect atmosphere for this horror experience. Each carefully crafted element works seamlessly to immerse the player in the dingy submarine. The grimy look provides a level of disgust, while the sound design makes it feel like the craft could come apart at any second. Combined with the game's use and non-use of music, this allows the game's atmosphere to permeate throughout the entire playthrough.
That was really the paramount thing, is this, it's feeling that's hard to quite explain, but that I wanted to capture of, it's like, it's red, it's hot, it's like creaking metal, and it's claustrophobic, and there's steam, and it's just like this sort of industrial horror feel to your submarine. And then I really, really wanted to try and nail the feeling that there are things outside of the sub, and it's not. I tried to focus as hard as I could on tricking the player into feeling like it's more than just you're in a tiny room and there are sounds happening around you. And it seems to, for most people, I seem to have been successful with that. That's why there's moments like a creature passing and the proximity alert going off, because it's supposed to be like, no, this is a physical thing that is there. It's not just a noise that's happening. You're trying to trick your brain into feeling more like that, because the reality is it's a room with sounds going on outside because it's a video game. That's how you make it. I think I had always figured on music being in the game. Um, and originally, so the original concept for Iron Lung came about in a Loch Ness museum in Scotland. Um, and it was just that idea of like being in a submarine underwater and taking grainy pictures of something that you can't really see around you, some creature or something, I thought was really creepy. And along with that idea also came this sort of atmosphere of, or this idea of like, watching documentaries as a kid, like a documentary about like searching for Nessie or whatever, and they'll always have the part where they like, it's maybe there'd be a submarine underwater and it's playing this certain sort of music. It's like really low strings, and as a kid, it's like that's kind of terrifying. And originally I had conceptualized doing something similar with the music in Iron Lung, having almost documentary style, like just wallpaper, low, creepy strings. And then as I started building it, and getting a better idea of the specific, more industrialized atmosphere that it was kind of shaping up to be, then I was like, well, the first thing that comes to mind when I think industrial, creepy ambient music is Aubrey Hodges' work in Doom 64, which I think is just phenomenal ambient nastiness. And so that's what I wanted to try and do with Iron Lung. So I wrote a few tracks, and with just a few tracks, it's like there were places in the game where you could be like, this is a place where you should have music. And then other times, with a couple other ones, it was like, I feel like there needs to be music here, so I'll go write a track. There's a long sequence where you're in the big open part of the game, and you're kind of going, it's where you're going to eventually take a picture of the whale carcass. And so there's an extended amount of time where the player's just sitting there holding forward and moving forward. And that, I think that's the first time music comes in the game after the intro. And having that change of like, okay, we're just kind of going forward, and then suddenly this music creeps in. I felt that was necessary for tension building, because when music comes in, the player starts thinking, oh, something's about to happen, because music is happening. And that was like the first time you hear it. So that was a place where it was like, I need a track here, so I'll write something.
Nearly as important as the game's atmosphere is the narrative lore that it sprinkles in throughout the game. The quiet rapture and its mysteries have engulfed players since the game's release. Just a month before I had interviewed David for the first time back in 2021, news broke that the Dead Sea in Jordan turned blood red. While it was certainly a coincidence, I couldn't stop drawing comparisons between Iron Lung's world and what had happened with the Dead Sea. Alongside this, the biblical references to seas turning blood red also added an extra element of intrigue I had into David's inspiration for the title. However, David created Iron Lung with a different image in mind.
I guess it gets kind of dark here, but the last few years, last 5 or 6 years, have just been tumultuous, and I find that my mind is really the idea of things ending, of a final disaster, and sort of like the world as we know it ending, or my own life ending and everything, is really close to the surface of my brain a lot, just because of how tumultuous things are. And not that I'm saying like, oh, I think the world's gonna end or something. It's just those thoughts are always kind of present, either because the world is more tumultuous than it used to be, or because we see more of it because of social media or whatever. But it's not just with Iron Lung, it's a lot of the ideas that I've come up with or tried to prototype are very based in this idea of like a final ending. And that's mostly where Iron Lung came. Iron Lung is like the darkest version of that, where it's like, this is about the universe has basically died, but people are still left to witness it being dead. That's sort of the darkest version of that. There's other stuff I've worked on or tried to bring to light, tried to bring to life that's kind of more um, uh, take some more like philosophical attitude toward, not in like it's philosophizing, but more of like a here's an end and here's how it may, you know, there's peace here, whatever. But Iron Lung was more about like this. I just wanted to create a nightmare, basically. And the universe, the apocalyptic nature, and I always saw it, even though I can't delve into actual theories about what's happened behind like the Quiet Rapture or anything, because I really don't want to answer those questions, and I don't think they need to be answered. About like specifically what happened with the Quiet Rapture, but you know, I have my own ideas, but I don't think that's a question that ever actually needs to be spelled out Prometheus style. You know, I don't want to ruin, because to me it's not important. To me the important thing is that it did happen, and this is the aftermath. So that world setup was to enhance this idea of you're in this submarine, you're in this enclosed claustrophobic space. And that's not a safe space. That's like you're down under however many tons of not even water, it's like blood. And there's creatures outside that you can't see, and you're just in this danger of like you could die at any moment, and you don't know how necessarily. And then even above this blood ocean and outside of the submarine, it's just a void of nothing. So these are all layers that I wanted to use to create this atmosphere of just, it's a complete nightmare. You know, they were to create this feeling, if that makes sense.
David's work in Iron Lung is almost similar to that of his previous work on the Moon Sliver, a game where you slowly watch the water engulf the last bit of land on Earth. Both titles deal with the idea of living after the world has ended, but David is quick to point out that the Moon Sliver is more melancholic. Iron Lung is not.
Oh, it's because Moon Sliver was more of like as you say, it's a very similar idea, but Moon Sliver was always supposed to be a little more, not melancholic rather than nightmarish. And really the themes in it are that it's left in the Moon Sliver, it's left pretty ambiguous whether like people are being saved or whether they're being dragged to hell, basically. And the idea there was always more to create this sense of like windswept melancholy. Like the Moon Sliver is very open, you know, the idea was you're supposed to always feel this like wind and this bleakness. And you know, the end is quiet when it happens. It's just that everyone is now gone and it's just the barren island. Whereas the end in Iron Lung, when it happens, is, well, sudden, violent, doesn't leave you with any closure.
The ending of Iron Lung is abrupt. It's also part of the game that divided players the most. For what is mostly a psychological horror experience built on atmosphere, it's easy to see why some players might find the ending of the title to be somewhat abrupt, and that it goes against the rest of the game's tone.
The original ending, that was never, this was never made. This is just what was in my head. Originally, I was thinking, the end would be that you get the final photo and then the ballasts inflate and you're able to go up. But as you're going up, the sub is flooding, you're out of oxygen, you're starting to not be able to breathe, and you know, so you're just watching the depth gauge go up as some sort of music is rising, you know, some sort of horrible grindy metal thing. And like the level of blood is rising and the oxygen is out and your vision's maybe blurring and you're hearing your character start gasping. And then you get up to the top and you hear them start cutting you out. And the very final thing you see is like the top of the sub coming off and just like blinding white light coming in, and then it cuts to black and it's Iron Lung. So that's all to say that originally I was thinking your character would survive. And then I chickened out, basically. I played through it, and no, I didn't play through it. I knew what was going to happen, and I played bits of it, and I was just feeling like it's really gonna. First of all, I'm afraid it's really gonna disappoint people to get to the end of this and have no payoff, and it's just all this tension building for nothing. And I was afraid that was going to undermine the game. And second of all, I knew that you were spending most of the game either up front and driving the sub or going back to the camera. So during the course of the game, the player is going to turn around and go back toward that camera like dozens and dozens of times. And I just was like, it is such a wasted opportunity not to have something happen when you turn around. When you've gotten them that feeling that safe in a routine, it is a waste not to have something shocking happen. It ended up being really divisive for people, and I completely understand why after seeing the responses and reading it. A lot of people ended up feeling it was cheap, and it actually ended up devaluing the rest of the experience. And I can see their point. I still think I still stand behind how it was set up. I don't think it was a cheap scare. I think I set it up pretty well. But I can also understand people are like that, it's all this buildup and then it's just a JPEG. It's not a JPEG, by the way. That is a model of a fish. It just looks, in that moment, because of how the lighting is and everything, it looks like it's just a flat JPEG, and that also devalues it. But yeah, so anyway, looking back, I don't know, maybe I should have done it differently. I've also heard from people who are like, no, it's fine. It's a good way to end the game. I'm not sure what to take away from that. I really wish that I could cut out the quality and inspiration of the ending of Squirrel Stapler and somehow apply that to the end of Iron Lung, because I think Squirrel Stapler's ending is maybe the greatest horror moment I have ever done, and I'm so happy with it, and I really wish that I could say that about the ending of Iron Lung, considering it's my most popular horror game.
Needless to say, Iron Lung has had a definitive impact on players, and it's David's most recognisable psychological horror title to date. Many questions have been put forward as to what is next for this universe.
So the universe for Iron Lung is something I had always envisioned multiple games in. But I have never envisioned it as being something where, okay, we will have a sequel now that explains the lore. Or really, because to me, the Quiet Rapture is interesting and cool because it happened, not because of the reasons it happened, if that makes sense. I think the thing that makes it interesting is the uncertainty surrounding it. And if it was just like, oh, now we know exactly why it happened, that's really destroying the idea, which is that the point is that it's this mysterious, completely inexplicable event that had this cataclysmic effect on life as humans know it. And I think the interesting part of that is the fact that you can't explain it. I think it's cool that people then try and make theories about what could happen and everything. I think that's also part of enjoying something like that. It's like, oh, what could have happened? Maybe this happened. Maybe this happened. But I think it would just completely destroy the very concept of it to then come out and give you concrete lore about why this happened. And that said, I've always envisioned there being multiple games in the universe. I don't know if those would ever happen. I will say that you will see more of Iron Lung at some point here, but it may not be what you expect.
Thank you so much for watching this video. If you'd like to hear the full 1-hour discussion I had with David about Iron Lung and his other previous work, there's a companion podcast that you can check out right now, linked in the description of this video. I'd also love to hear your thoughts on Iron Lung. While there are a plethora of other videos diving into the game's features and story, what did you make of the title? What did you like? What would you hope to see in the future? Whatever you can think of. With that being said, thank you so much for watching and have a great day.